Here we go.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Loud and Agile Network, our spring event with Andrew Long. Good evening, and so happy to have you all here to hear about profit-driven Agile. We speak often about value, but how can a company sustainably deliver value if we're not that sustainable revenue and profitability? So, Andrew, thank you for bringing this topic up. So relevant. A little about Andrew today. He is a certified profit streams trainer, designer, and a safe practice consultant. He co-founded Start with Profit to help businesses achieve sustainable profitability. He began his journey 15 years ago in the government context, and since then has consulted a diverse range of product, market, technology domains, including fintech, cyber, aerospace, core IT, law enforcement, and ed tech. Thank you so much, Andrew, for making the time and the effort to bring your knowledge to this community.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. All right, well, I get the slides up here and share my screen. This will take a moment. But yeah, just to continue on that theme, I had kind of a circuitous route to profit. I grew up in the government world and started Agile coaching in the government realm, for the past 10 years plus. And so we really struggled with defining business value, right? What is business value in the government context? And how do we do things like latest, shortest job first in the government, especially if you're in a intelligence community, law enforcement, national security setting. So I was kind of forced into deep thinking about what value means and how to discover and define value in that context. And I just kind of made the silly assumption that when I started doing commercial consulting with the likes of Cisco and PayPal and other companies like that, that the concept of revenue and profit would be much more directly translatable to product backlogs. And that wasn't necessarily the case, especially if you're in the CIO shop. You're still very well insulated from revenue streams and those kinds of discussions. But I know there are definitely some product channels where our IT products were supporting, core consumer products that drove revenue. And so, yeah, it was interesting to see that even there, Agile wasn't really talking about profit very much. So, about a little over a year ago, if you folks know Luke Homan, he's a SAFE fellow, and he's recently started Profit Streams, which is a branch. I wouldn't say it's a branch of a SAFE, but it's kind of a culmination, I think, of all his learning and experiences in his career. And so I was apparently the first person to sign up to partner with him. I found that pretty interesting. I know there's a lot of partners now, and apparently I was somehow the first through the chute. So that feels pretty cool. But I've gotten to know Luke very well over the past year and a half now. We've done a few things together, a few workshops and trainings. Him and his CEO, Jason Tanner, at Applied Frameworks, wrote a book called Software Profit Streams that I encourage you to take a look. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today comes from that book, comes from the Profit Stream Canvas that Jason and Luke came out with. But a lot of it's kind of my own flavors added to it that you'll see as we go through here. So going back to that kind of core question, why don't Agilists already obsess about profit? You would think that this would be core to how we think about the world. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software, but valuable to whom, right? And that kind of question, I think, just kind of gets skipped over. And especially if you're delivering a product that needs to generate revenue, there is a difference between customer value and business value. They're not the same thing. Both tie into profitability, but there's a circuitous relationship there that we need to explore. And so let's just kind of quickly define a term here. So customer, to me, is the entity acquiring your product. If you've done value stream mapping, value stream concepts, lean, Toyota production system concepts, often we'll say, your customers, whoever you're delivering your particular product to, right? So if you're building an API internally for consumption, that, the person who's going to use your API or the other entity that's going to use your API, that consumer is your customer. That's okay. We can have internal customers, but for the context of this conversation, I prefer to say the customer is somebody who's writing you a check. And by someone, I mean it's an entity, right? It could be the user could be an employee, right? And the company, the organization is the one paying for it, or it could be B2C. You're downloading an app and paying for it, right? So the customer's writing the check, the user's the people actually using it. Okay. Customer can buy on behalf of users. Sometimes in more complex transaction, you might have a buyer, and this could be like a procurement agent or somebody who's officially managing the process on behalf of the government or an organization that you interact with. And somewhere in there may be a decision authority that's even different from all those people. So it can get really complex when you talk about customers and who's what value we're delivering to, right? Are we delivering value to the customer, right? Am I delivering value to Cisco is buying, my services? Is my customer the contract agent that's writing the check? Is it the organization and the management of the organization that's sponsoring me and whose budget's being spent on me? Or is it the teams that I'm helping, right? Those are the users of my services, as it may be. So we want to understand, what do we mean by customer value? Who's it going to? And what is that customer experience? And so the takeaway there is that it's more than just user value. You could potentially need to have value that you need to deliver to users, but also to the management of the users or to the organization as a whole. B2C simplifies things for the most part because oftentimes that's the same person. Another key takeaway here is we can deliver a lot of customer value and go out of business if we don't figure out how to translate that customer value that we're delivering to their willingness to write us a check. Okay, so there has to be a relationship between customer value and business value. What is it? Um, I want to just kind of suggest there are a couple of really simplistic ways to think about this that'll be helpful for our conversation today. There's a core math equation that we could probably build out if you want to use math notation, but it's essentially customer value is the benefits you're delivering to the customer minus their cost to own your solution, right? Or buy your service. So that could be, for example, if the customer is buying Miro, they're paying for Miro licenses, but they may be having to pay for an admin to manage access privileges and integration with other systems inside the company, right? So all those solution costs that they have on their side, that's their cost to own in addition to the licenses they pay Miro, right? So they have to be getting more value out of Miro than all of that for it to be worth it to them. Okay. So what we have then is we have, a concept of there's customer benefits and that's what drives customer value, but value is actually less than the benefit, right? Because we got to deliver more benefits than is the cost to utilize those benefits for that to be valuable. Okay. Then you have business value, right? This is a little bit more straightforward, and it's straightforward from the sense of the cost to deliver that value minus the business benefit that we get, what we get paid for that value, minus the cost to do that work or to deliver that value, right? So if you're charging, as a consultant, right, if you're charging a $500,000 for an engagement for 6 months and two coaches, right? And then you're paying salaries and you have other ancillary costs that come up to 400,000. Okay, cool. You come out net 100 positive. That's a profit, right? That's your margin. Now, what's interesting, if you look at this value stick on the right, if you guys have read the book, I think it's called Better, Simpler Strategy, came out of one of the Harvard Business School gurus, but there's this concept of the value stick that I think is going to really help us orient this concept here of customer delight is the delta between the willingness to pay and the price they actually pay, right? So what's not shown on here is the customer benefits. You would be delivering customer benefits even in surplus of that willingness to pay. And because of that, they have a willingness to pay a certain amount for a solution. And if the price is less than that, then that's delight, right? So I think that's really cool that we can actually talk about customer delight in a way that translates to dollars and cents. And then obviously we understand the margin for us is the delta between the price and cost. And then there's something called supplier surplus as well, which is, for example, if you have an Agile coach on your team who's willing to work in your firm for $150,000 annual salary, but you pay them $200,000, that 50,000 is supplier surplus, and it makes them very happy to work for you, right? Same thing works for W-2 employees. And those benefits could also be, it doesn't necessarily have to be compensation. It could be things like very popular things from Silicon Valley where they're catering lunches and they're riding around the office on razors. This is all pre-pandemic. Hopefully they're getting back to that now. But those sorts of ancillary benefits are also, quote unquote, supplier surplus to employee. That's your employee engagement, your employee satisfaction, right? So similar to customer delight. So think about that, kind of keep that in your head. Now let's look at what I would call the value to profit chain. So if we're talking about value, customer value, and business value, this is the basic formula. Deliver more customer benefits, increase the customer's willingness to pay because of those increased benefits. And therefore, that means they're more happy with your product, increase customer delight, and then figure out how to maybe raise the price or some other way to convert that customer delight to business value. And that could be, for example, NPS, right? In your customer acquisition. If you have a product that has a lot of customer delight, people would pay $100 a month for it, and you're only charging 50. And therefore, your NPS, that's part of why your NPS is really high, and it's really easy to get more customers, and you're grabbing the market like wildfire. That's one example, right? It could also be if they're willing to pay 100 and you're charging 50, maybe you should increase your price to 70, right? You might be able to get away with that without losing many customers, right? And come out way ahead and profit. So there are different things you can do. It creates opportunities to raise your prices, look at different solution packages, upsell your customer to new modules or benefits, improves customer retention and acquisition. All those things are things that we want to target when we start to think about, okay, this feature in our backlog, this new idea that somebody had in our business, okay, that we think that's going to deliver user value. We're going to convert that, think of that in terms of the customer benefits this feature would provide. How is that going to raise willingness to pay? And how is that going to change customer delight? And what's our opportunity there to translate customer delight to business value? Okay, so those are the conversations you want to start to think about in your system. Okay, and I use that word system now, segue. A software business model is a system. So we want to apply systems thinking to our software business model when we are in a software business. And that could be, a not software as a service. That could be, you're delivering widgets of some sort, but you also have apps and other digital services that go along with those widgets. For example, a car, if you're delivering automobiles that have all sorts of software components to them, you could still use the software business model as a system concept, okay? And that means if you're using a heavy amount of software that customers use, you're talking about licenses, which you need to manage, right? And you're developing and selling software or software-related services. All these things come together as a system. So we really have to think about the different variables in the system, such as how the customer and the solution interact, the license models, the pricing and packaging that we use. So if that's true, then we should look at how do we visualize that? How can we utilize those concepts and make it easier to manage that software business system? And that's where Luke and Jason and Software Profit Streams created the Profit Stream Canvas. And if you've seen the lean business canvas, the business model canvas, there's from Strategizer, there's all sorts of great canvases out there. So add this to the pile to potentially use with your clients or internally if this is for your company. But if we organize the elements of our system into a canvas, it makes it a lot easier to kind of see how things interrelate, helps promote innovation and collaboration, okay? So what we want to do here, I probably should have taken away the animations because actually, for the most part, don't like animations, but this is what the Profit Stream Canvas looks like. Hopefully this is big enough for you to see. If you want a better view of this, you can download this from my website. If you go to startwithprofit.consulting, you will see this canvas as an option to download. And so you can kind of see basically a lot of boxes, all right? But it's a very well thought through layout. The left side is all about the customer. The right side is all about the provider, the solution provider, okay? And everything in the middle are kind of how the things interact, the left side to the right side, right? So the customer consumes a solution and there's a value exchange there. There's a mechanism by which they consume the product that generates business value. So we'll kind of pull the thread on that in a few minutes. And then you have things like your pricing strategy and pricing structure and all that stuff. You have something called a profit engine. That is the profit streams term for things that you do to either increase the volume of transactions with a client, with a customer, or increase the value of those transactions with the customer. So it's kind of a business model related element. And then you have your in and out licenses and how you do compliance and that sort of thing. You know, your customer ROI, right? We got to make sure that there's a very good return on investment for purchasing our solution. And that's an element that we heavily emphasize, helping folks build that out and see that so they can better sell their product and keep it sold. And then you got to obviously have your own solution ROI modeling to make sure you're staying in the black and you're hitting your profit targets if you're a public company and you have different kinds of P&L concerns for bonuses and sales targets and that sort of thing, right? So you want to have a good solution ROI model to track that. And so if you want to have a sustainably profitable product or solution, you've got to be looking at these elements and make key decisions. They're interdependent choices. What you do in one box affects things in another box, and you're going to be constantly making and adjusting those choices over time because they're interdependent. Okay. So keep that in the back of your head. Now, coming back to this customer value, business value problem, right? We definitely want to think about the relationship in the canvas here. Kind of looks like this, right? We have customer value on the left, business value on the right. And how do they relate? Basically, we want to, sorry, still have to click here. It got too fancy for myself. You want to make it compelling to use, compelling to buy, right? And deepen the investment. Those are all kind of the things that are happening in customer value across those various boxes. And then if you're looking on the right side, right, we're going to be looking at things like delivery and usage metrics, customer satisfaction, how often they're visiting the website, how often purchase transactions go through versus, shopping cart abandonment type metrics, right? You're going to have financial metrics, the key kinds of things your CFO and shareholders will be looking at. And then marketing metrics, like how are we doing? What's our cost of customer acquisition, conversion rates, lead gen, all that kind of stuff, right? So these are all the different metrics you're going to be looking at on the right side to help translate to business value. And so they're related through elements in the canvas like the value stream, the value exchange, the pricing model, and the profit engine. Okay. So let me pause here real quick because I've just dumped a whole bunch of stuff on you. Just kind of raise of hands, I guess, in the chat, or maybe some emojis on the screen, like thumbs up, this is making sense. Or if you have some questions, I'll just pause now, to say, hey, that you said something that was kind of weird. Can we go back and talk about that?
I don't see any questions, Andrew, but feel free to raise your hands. We'll unmute.
All right.
It's a great tool. I just captured it and posted in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep going. All right, so now we're going to peel the onion a little bit. All right. So let's talk about business value first. And if you ever have a conversation with your CFO, or maybe you're in a big organization, you're not going to be talking directly to the CFO. You might have a bunch of financial analysts running around that as a coach, product manager, product owner, delivery manager, whatever hat you're wearing, you have some level of finance interaction. The basic idea is, right, your operating profit is revenue minus expenses, right? And we can expand that a little bit to clarify what kind of expenses, right? Sales and marketing, your delivery costs, development and delivery costs, and general and overhead, right? How efficient you are from a management and administration perspective.
So do you want to go to, sorry, there was a question. Which were the highlighted areas in the previous slide? Maruvan has that. So
was that in the chat? Sorry. Which were the highlighted areas in the previous slide? Okay, let me go back. So the highlighted areas, so what I basically did, I just got these kind of ovals over the interactions of these boxes. So customer value, when you talk about customer value from a profit stream canvas perspective, you're looking at the interaction of the customer with the value exchange model you're using, the pricing strategy you have, And let me kind of define some things. If you haven't heard the term value exchange before, that's Luke's term that he invented, actually not in profit streams, but a couple decades ago, to discuss things like how do customers pay, the exchange of value. How is that? What is the unit of measure there? Are they paying for time, right? So most subscription services are time based, monthly or annual, or even a perpetual license that's time based, right? Maybe you're paying for data. For example, Google sells your data to folks. That's another way. Or it could be even a service, right? It could be a labor-based service. So I worked with one company that is a partner with Palo Alto Networks. So they resell the Palo Alto network equipment, and they make their money on delivering the managed firewall services, right? Configuring and setting up and managing those firewalls for the customer. So they make their money on the labor. They sell the equipment right at a discount. So that's a hardware-based, it's a service-based value exchange. Microsoft Xbox, that's a hardware-based value exchange. You buy an Xbox, right? But then you can also buy time-based things, right? You can, you can subscribe to different things in the Microsoft universe, right? So there's 7 total different kinds of value exchanges. I don't want to get too training class focused here, but that's essentially what a value exchange is. Are they paying for time? Are they paying for performance? Are they paying for, human-based labor services that maybe AI takes over? Who knows? And so that's what that means, right? Pricing is pretty straightforward. It's, are you trying to charge premium pricing? Are you more competitive? And different specifics and policies you might have around discounts.
I
And
think
that sort of thing.
Andrew, he's also referring to the previous slide, previous slide, I think. Let's see there were 2 slides on the canvas, and I think the highlighted areas were not the same on both. Maybe this one, is that the one?
Yeah, so I think what I'm basically doing in this slide is I'm kind of ignoring the licensing issue. Okay, so when you are developing software, you're dealing with intellectual property, you manage that via licenses. So that is a part of the canvas that's important. For the purpose of this discussion, we're kind of ignoring the licensing compliance topic. It's not to say it doesn't matter, interrelate, but we're really more focused on how the customer thinks of ROI, and how the customer derives benefits from our solutions. What's our ROI from a business case perspective? And then the value exchange, pricing, and profit engine topics, are the core elements that mediate between those two sides. So I think that's probably the best I can do right now without getting too far off topic, but I would love to connect with you offline and take you deeper into the canvas if you have that interest. But I want to get through this slide real quick and just kind of ask you guys, if you're an Agilist, whether you're a Scrum Master, product owner, developer, I don't really care what your role is. If you feel like you're an Agilist, you care a lot about Agile, and that's why you're here at the Loud and Agile Network. Where do you think it makes sense for Agilists to focus? What is the more enticing lever, right? So if we're trying to affect operating profit, we basically have 4 big areas to target: revenue, sales and marketing costs, development delivery costs, and general administrative. Where do you think, as an Agilist, it makes the most sense to focus on? Where's the biggest bang for the buck, do you think? And by the way, if there are any CPAs in the house, I am oversimplifying, right? There's definitely things like capital interest, depreciation. I get it. Cost of capital, I should say. So there are other elements too, but these are the big hitters.
So Andrew, I feel that for most parts, Agilists, I mean, the roles that you talked about, product owners, Scrum Master, Agile coach, we are more focused on delivery. We are more focused on execution. And oftentimes we are either not included in the conversations related to revenue, and those things happen at a different tier. Not that we don't want to be included in it, but it's just the way, at least my observation and my experience has been. So my response to your question is, I feel that our focus is generally on the cost, although we don't use the word cost, but we are looking at value. We are constantly looking at metrics. We are looking at burn downs. We are looking at our predictability. We are looking at our say-do ratios. What did we say we're going to do, and what did we deliver? I feel those translate to cost, but I don't think my mind has been trained to think about cost. We think about value. We think about reducing waste. We think about lean. And I think these things translate to cost. So I'm here to be enlightened and to learn. But I think that's what at least Agilists think. And I feel that I'm speaking for a bunch of us at least. And I want to hear other thoughts as well related to this.
Yeah, Toby, I agree with you. And I think for those of us who've spent a good part of our career arguing that we shouldn't treat IT as a cost center, or we should think of software delivery, right, as it's value creation, whether it's in the IT shop
Yep.
or somewhere else in the product side. I think that the basic gap accounting procedures are kind of against us a little bit unless we can show how we're actually increasing revenue. But that doesn't mean that, it's not valuable, right? We can add value to the company. But I think that the takeaway I want to leave you with, right, is if you're only focused on reducing cost, improving performance, if it's not translatable to increasing revenue, there's only so much cost you can take out of a system, right? Because you still have to pay salaries, you still have to run an organization. So it's kind of like this asymptotic curve that it can't ever get to zero, right? Whereas revenue theoretically can climb forever and ever, right? And that's not totally realistic. I'm sure there's a number in the trillions that, Apple eventually is not going to be able to make that amount of money, or Nvidia maybe is overtaking them with all the AI stuff. But the idea, what's enticing about, for example, software as a service is this idea of scaling, that for a minimal increase in my cost basis, I can support massive amounts of scale in customers, right? And so what I'm really paying for is incremental cost, maybe to run a few more servers or to have a few more salespeople and marketing campaigns. But the return on that is exponential as far as revenue generation, right? So that's why folks like the as a service model is you're able to basically contain the cost pretty well, and you can throttle the revenue up if you've got the right product and a good sales strategy.
Yeah. Andrew, can I add something to my earlier response? So I was letting that marinate in my mind. So I guess I'm trained the more traditional way. So I think of things as fixed costs and variable costs, right? So your rent and your salaries and other things are your fixed costs, and then you have your variable costs. So I feel that, like, in answer to your question, the work that we do can help in reducing or diminishing the variable cost to a certain level. Well, you cannot really reduce the cost, but you can increase the value and the throughput, hopefully, that comes out of it. I'll stop there.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold that thought, because I'm going to talk about performance here in a couple slides. So business value from the growth levers, right? I talked about SaaS. There's a very common metric that investors use when they're looking at investing in SaaS companies. They want to see the lifetime customer value over the cost of customer acquisition. And so they're basically, that ends up translating into, the amount of revenue you're bringing in minus your development delivery costs. And some folks have different arguments about which costs go in the numerator, which costs go in the denominator as it relates to acquiring customers and delivering to them. But basically, revenue minus your development delivery costs divided by the number of customer accounts you have, right? And then all of that divided by basically your churn rate, okay? And that's your lifetime customer value. And then your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, generally is your cost of sales and marketing divided by how many new accounts you're bringing in a given period. So if you're looking at an annual LTV CAC or a monthly LTV CAC, right, you would use the numbers accordingly. And that's really what drives SaaS valuation, is how nice that proportion is, that ratio is. And so if you look at the different elements in this picture, this is from the lean stack folks, right? Their customer factory model. You can see the different elements at play, right? Acquiring customers, activating them. So acquiring is they basically come to your website, they clicked a link to your website maybe. Activate is they signed up, now they're on your mailing list or they've got an account. Okay. And then retention is, yeah, they keep coming back, they stick around. And then revenue is they do something that causes revenue, right? They purchase, they sign up for subscription, right? And then referral, they tell their friends, hey, yeah, come on this website as well. Now, if you're talking about something like Facebook or Google, where the people are the product, right? The customer is the product. You're doing all these things, and the revenue is basically getting the data about those people to sell to marketing firms and ad firms and all that kind of stuff, right? But point being, that's the essential model, and there's definitely derivatives of this. It gets more complex than this, but I think this really helps us understand when you're trying to grow. Now let's think about, as an Agilist, what kind of things can we do, help our business do better on some of these core metrics? Can we help build features that generate or encourage the client to refer their friends and family to sign up as well, right? Can we make it easier to acquire and activate? Can we have more enticing offerings on the website that they're willing to buy? What kind of things drive them to abandon the shopping cart and not come back? Those retention issues. How do we reduce churn? So those kinds of questions are all the kinds of questions I think that Agilists can definitely participate in and run experiments and support. What I like to call user anthropology, right? But customer discovery type questions. What's the problem to solve? What's the job to be done? How do we convert that opportunity to increase one of these value drivers? Okay. So the point being, there's a lot of leverage points here on the revenue side that maybe we're not used to thinking about that can help drive revenue. And there's some hidden levers too. So I mentioned earlier that the simplistic equation of revenue minus expenses, we have things like cost of capital. We have things like risks and liabilities that show up, a little bit differently on the balance sheet that we actually impact. So for example, cybersecurity, might be one of those things that a lot of companies and government agencies for a while find a way to go skimpy on. And of course, once there's a hack somewhere in either that company or agency or somebody similar, and they realize they're at risk, all of a sudden they start throwing money at the problem, right? And that's because whatever you think the risk probability is, there might be a fat tail problem, right? If you're familiar with the Black Swan concept, Nassim Nicholas Taleb, where you might have a very improbable event down that tail risk that actually the consequence is really, really high. So you might say it's not very likely to happen, but if it ever happened, it could wipe out your business or seriously degrade your operations, right? So you want to look at those things. How can we, as Agilists, help promote smart risk reduction strategies? How can we help incrementally reduce risk in a very agile, lean, DevOps kind of way, DevSecOps kind of shift left on security, all that stuff, right? So that's a lever. That's a hidden lever that, again, it doesn't show up quite as one-to-one on the balance sheet. It's a little bit circuitous. It's more of this kind of Monte Carlo tail risk type scenario. But the CFOs will understand this, right? Because when you report to Wall Street, you actually have to convert those kinds of risks to dollars. And that's part of the quarterly reporting on, if you ever look at the quarterly reports of the companies you invest in. Innovation and opportunity enables another one. Optionality converts to value, converts to dollars, right? So the better you are at helping your teams be able to pivot quickly, to learn rapidly, hypothesis-driven development, innovation accounting, all those concepts from lean startup. If you can really build and hone the innovation engine and continuously develop opportunities, high value potential opportunities, that in and of itself is a value generator. That optionality, options again can be converted to dollars on the balance sheet as far as worth, right? And then just continuous improvement. We always, as we continuously get better, we do retrospectives, INA cycles if you're using SAFe, right? Those sorts of things help us continuously perform better in many different ways. And I think that's probably the core, to me, that's the core element of Agile, is that continuous improvement, right? If I look at the 12 principles in the Agile Manifesto, if you screw up if you're screwing up everything in the Agile Manifesto, if you at least get the last principle right of, inspecting and adapting on a regular basis as a team, you're going to eventually start to fix the other things around delivering value and, building better software and being sustainable and all that sort of stuff. So just a little bit of a wrap up for the business value type concepts. Again, we want to find customers, acquire those customers, find potential customers, acquire those customers, sell to those customers to generate revenue, right? And then on more the cost side, how we're delivering, how we're promoting retention, attractive packages that lure those customers to take a look at us. Those are all elements that we can touch. And then in the middle is that kind of how we de-risk, how we add innovation, how we perform, lean and mean. That's all those elements there. Agile touches all of that, right? And so if you're doing a new product, you're probably more in the yellow boxes up top. In achieving business viability, you're probably going back and forth between getting the customer, selling to the customer, and then figuring out your cost model and churn to see if we can balance that and stay profitable. If you've got business viability, you're more about growth and you're looking at the LTV CAC stuff. How do we refine our package? How do we optimize our pricing model and our profit engines? And again, these are all things that Profit Streams Canvas helps you with. And at every stage, again, you want to be able to continuously invest in people, process, and technology to improve your business performance and resiliency. Again, all things that Agilists care about. Now, a little bit of a framework overlap. If you've read Wiring the Winning Organization by Gene Kim, just came out last year. I just read it a couple weeks ago, and a huge fan of the book for a lot of reasons that I won't go into here. But if you take their model about slowification, simplification, and amplification being the key to high-performing organizations, that translates to that blue box in the middle, right? That's how we administer effectively our organizations, how we de-risk and innovate and perform, right? And if you're familiar with the evidence-based management from scrum.org, that translates really well too. The bottom part's there, how effective is your organization at improving value? How long does it take to deliver that value? Those are things that relate to that Gene Kim model, right? And then the top half of that of adding potential value and converting that, to current value, those are your customer value, business value boxes that I've laid out. So you can kind of see that you can go to other places, whether it's scrum.org or, some of the work that Gene Kim's done recently, and you can see there's a commonality, right? There's a thematic coherence here that I think really kind of points to how this is valid and useful. So let's now switch to customer value. So I want to pause here just for a minute before we dive into customer value. How are you guys feeling about these concepts for the business value generation and the different elements of revenue and cost and where we can tweak things? You guys starting to have some ideas about, levers and ways to play the game inside your business, inside your organizations? Going once, going twice. Hopefully I haven't put you all to sleep.
It's we got another question. Which book by Gene Kim did you mention?
Yeah, it's called Wiring the Winning Organization. It just came out late last year, I think, so it's pretty new. I'll type it in the chat real quick.
Oh, I just did. Is it? Yeah.
Yep. And then the evidence-based management guide actually was just updated. So if you look for that at scrum.org, they had a few announcements about those updates, but that's a useful tool as well if you haven't used that before. To me, it's basically hypothesis-driven development tied to OKRs, but yeah, it's good stuff. All right, so let's go through customer value real quick. So is there a similar equation we could use to describe customer value? So I would suggest it looks something like this. The maximum customer value you could have, theoretically, is the magnitude of benefits you provide. There's a benefit you provide, that magnitude, plus another benefit you provide, and that magnitude, plus on and on and on to n number of benefits your product or solution might provide. Okay, so that's a maximum theoretical customer value. On the flip side, there's a cost there. So what is the customer's cost to implement your solution? What is the customer's cost to operate that solution? And then the transaction cost, right? They're writing you a check, they're subscribing to your service, or whatever the case may be. You add those up. So your net customer value formula would be the maximum customer value of all your benefits that you provide them minus those three costs. Okay. Now, again, I need to maybe pause here and make sure we're on the same page. Benefits are not the same as features, right? You might have a product and that product has features. Those features should cause benefits for the customer, should provide benefits to the customer. But again, those are things you need to validate. When you build features, you got to validate, is this actually beneficial? We go into that, right, with the idea of, oh, this is going to be great, they're going to love it. But again, we're pretty used to seeing all the data around, how many features in Microsoft Word are actually used and that sort of thing, right? So if very few features are used and not providing a lot of value, not providing a lot of benefits, we got to understand that the magnitude of those benefits and those features might be pretty low, right? So that leads to this idea of killer features, which are, there's usually one or two or maybe three features of a product that really drive the maximum, close to the maximum value, and everything else just icing on the cake. And so if you can understand what those are in your environment or your product, and make sure, or if you're in a new product development environment, if you don't know what your killer feature is, you want to figure that out, because that's going to be key to your success. Okay. So going a little bit deeper, all right, your revenue is the same thing as their transaction cost, right? So in that equation, if they have implementation cost, operational cost, and transaction cost, that transaction cost is equivalent to your revenue income from that particular customer. Okay. So you want to think about the theoretical price ceiling then is, we talked about the what was the word? Willingness to pay, right? There's a willingness to pay that they're going to have, and it's going to be partially driven based on the benefits they get minus the cost, but it's also going to be based on perception, right? So for example, I would argue that janitorial services are extremely valuable. I don't want to work in an office building that doesn't have janitors and crews that come in and clean everything, right? If I had to clean the office toilet myself, I would not want to work at that building for very long, right? So it's extremely valuable to me. But the problem is it's commoditized, right? It's basic labor, doesn't require a lot of skill. If you pass a drug test, you can do it, kind of a thing. And so we would be a little bit upset if we said, you had to pay a janitor $200,000 a year versus an Agile coach, right? Well, why do we think that? Do we think cleaning toilets isn't valuable? No, it is actually valuable. It's just that our willingness to pay is decreased by the fact that it's commodity, right? That it's very easy to find somebody to do that. So willingness to pay is a little tricky. It's definitely tied into the benefits you provide, but if there is a comparison point, a commodity, especially a commoditized type aspect to it, that's going to drive the WTP more than any benefits you provide. So you have to really look at, how can I deliver benefits that adjust WTP if I have competitors, or if there's clear commoditization aspects going on in the marketplace. All right. Then there's something called the price floor, right? Which is you can't sell below that number or you're out of business, right? So you need to figure that out. So that gives you kind of a range. You got your WTP / adjusted ceiling. You've got your price floor. You got maybe what competitors are charging. And now this is where we talk about things around pricing strategy. Do you feel like you're a premium or a luxury brand? Do you have the branding and the enthusiasm from your customer base to back that up? Or, are you using another pricing strategy? Are you trying to be very competitive, deliver more value at less cost, right? So there are different things there that traditional price analysis. This is the realm of traditional price analysis. But the idea here is you want to differentiate from the competition by being able to provide higher customer value and then figure out how to capture that value, or at least a portion of that value, back in higher price. Okay. I think that's the main takeaway.
Andrew, there is a question.
Yeah.
What is the best way to measure the benefit you or your features are providing to customers?
You know what? That was the perfect segue. We're about to talk about that.
Perfect.
All right. So I've got a couple of benefit card examples here, and I apologize if this is going to be a little bit hard to read. But I just took Miro because I think a lot of us use tools like Mural or Miro. And so I did a couple of examples. We like to use something called benefit cards in customer benefit analysis to figure out what benefits to provide and how much they're worth and how we might capture that value. So the one on the left is, enable remote whiteboarding, right? And who cares about that? In this case, we're going to say business teams. And there's just some, I wrote in the summary, you can see some of the scenarios there where, people might want to do remote whiteboarding. It's great to do whiteboarding in the office, but it would be good to do that online as well, especially if you're a distributed team. And that kind of collaboration, again, hypothesis here is that enables productivity improvements. You get better creativity, better employee engagement, et cetera. So those are the kind of benefits you might be getting from the benefit of providing a remote whiteboarding. So how do you translate the magnitude of that? This is where it gets a little bit more art mixed with science, right? Is you have to, again, start with a hypothesis if you don't have any data. But once you start to have some customers and some real use cases, you can refine this. But you basically look at, okay, well, let's suppose that an average team, productivity level is going to improve by 5%, right? And annual turnover has a certain cost, and we're going to decrease that by a certain percent. And then you throw in some bogey numbers around how much a team costs and what the average turnover cost is, right? And now you can come up with a number. Now, this is a completely made up number, didn't come from Miro. I'm just, backing into this and making up numbers here. But it kind of tells you this is how you approach the magnitude part. So how do I figure out what the magnitude of my benefit is? This is how you do that, right? So if Miro really is, just one business team, 4 or 5 team members are using Miro and it's really helping them be productive and stay engaged and not want to leave the company, you can extract that kind of benefit and convert it to, or you can extract from that benefit, a conversion to dollars and cents, right? And that's tangible, right? But intangible benefits too, like increased joy at work, reduced frustration, reduced anxiety, those things, you want to figure out how can I calculate that, right? The trick is kind of what I did here. If you can, if joy at work and reduced frustration has a value that can be turned into dollars and cents, it's probably going to be related to something like employee turnover. So sometimes you have to be a little bit creative with these, but this is the basic mechanism that we're talking about. On the right side, we've got another one where we're talking about enabling, protecting personal PII, with SSO and MFA, right? Excuse me, I said that wrong, not PII, IP, intellectual property. We're protecting our company's intellectual property with single sign-on multi-factor auth, right? Who cares about that? Well, if you have a chief information officer, chief information security officer, they're going to care about that, right? And so a similar kind of a thing, you can calculate, okay, what's the chance that you have a breach? What would that breach cost you, right? You can Monte Carlo sim that to get a more refined number. But again, that's a tangible thing. It's risk compliance related. And so now you have a reason to, or a way to calculate the benefits of, building out the SSO MFA, widget for your platform, right? So what do you do with all that? So you want to get a whole bunch of these benefit cards. And if you're talking about a product like Miro, you've got dozens of these potentially, right? So if you've got, let's say 10, 15 features, and each of those features provides multiple benefits, then yeah, you could be talking about dozens of these. But you can organize them, right? And you kind of align them to your customer segments. So for Miro, you might have business teams that are buying it for themselves, or maybe small consulting firms, right? Versus enterprise type customers. And now you can start to map them. You can aggregate them and see who needs which benefits, who cares the most about which benefits, and then which features do we build and ship and put into our product, how does that tie to those benefits, right? So you can start to draw these lines, and this starts to give you an idea of how to package your solution, right? So if the business teams only care about those pieces on the top, then you probably want to offer some package at a certain price point that they find palatable that only contains what they think they need. But if you're the enterprise customer like Cisco, where I was supporting them and they bought an enterprise license for Miro, you need things like audit logging, SSO, MFA, right? You need to enable admin screens, all sorts of stuff, right? So the takeaway here is if we go through our benefits, we capture the value of them, we translate that to our customer segments, we can start to optimize our packages, and then we can start to model the value of these benefits and the total cost of ownership and how we can potentially influence the customer perception of price fairness through something like a customer ROI tool that's either on our website, or our sales folks use that if it's some of the more high dollar transactions that sales teams that have longer sales cycles with enterprise customers, if they have a customer ROI tool that they can model this out to help close the deal, right? So this is how you can start to use customer value to, again, raise the willingness to pay and or change your package and price to generate more profitability. Okay. All right, last mile here. We got a few minutes left. Getting to a profit-driven backlog. All right, now what? We've got these ideas, we got these levers, could be delivering more customer benefits, could be lowering customer acquisition costs, whatever the case may be. I love this old Henrik Nyberg graphic where, we're not prioritizing based on HIPPO. We're not working on whatever we feel like as developers. We're working on this feature because we think it's going to generate this impact, right? This can have these benefits. And that matters to the company because it affects our LTV CAC ratio in a very good way, right? And we know we're done with that feature when we've seen those metrics change the way we expected. If they're not changing the way we expected, maybe we abandon it before we're finished, right? Based on leading indicators. Maybe if we see the improvement even more than we thought, maybe we kind of double down and we do more of that type of work because it's reaping a lot of generating a lot of fruit for us, right? So here's the way to kind of translate that, right? So if you start with orienting your work around profit impacting outcomes that we've discussed, whether it's the LTV CAC model or looking at the different equations on the balance sheet affecting delivery cost, affecting revenue, we can start to think about what kind of things might we do as a team. And it's not necessarily even just software backlogs. This could be your marketing teams, right? This could be your sales teams, your operations teams. How do they all touch those different elements, right? What things do they do that impact profit? And I love impact mapping. Impact mapping is a great way to take that business outcome, tie it back to the type of user actor behaviors that need to change that will impact the underlying profit variables. And then what is the work that we do that will influence those actors to change their behavior and the users or buyers to change their behavior, right? So you create epics around that behavior and that outcome. And so if you're in a safe construct, you can kind of get there with the business hypothesis statement that they have, but you really want to essentially get to the point where your epic outcome, your epic acceptance criteria are essentially your outcome hypotheses that are saying, hey, here's an epic to do this event that's going to acquire 1 million players, and here's how we think it's going to do that. That you want to capture that in the epic statement. So now you've got to craft features around that, and this is really focused on what work we think is going to drive that new behavior, that that outcome, not outcome, excuse me, the user behavior or the change in what people do, right, that ultimately results in some sort of profit lever impact. The features we're now looking at more, what work can we do? What change do we make to a system? What action do I take that we think is going to cause that behavior? Okay, and those are our features. And that's where we really want to look at cost of delay and other economic prioritization models that help us figure out what our best bets are. It's really a good way to think about this in terms of betting and where we think we have, the best leverage, the highest cost of delay type bets. And then we want to decompose those into very small backlog items that are clear, testable. I love kind of the executable spec of BDD scenarios, right? But it also is things like, if you got a marketing team, you're not doing BDD, but you might have, very clear actions that can be done in a couple hours or a day or two that you can show were done, right? So those are the kind of work items or tasks that you want to have in your backlog if you're a marketing team, or you're supporting a joint marketing, design, and development team. And you want to have those very clear closure criteria where once you start to deliver, you're getting data and you use that data to pivot or persevere or double down, right? So it's basically, bottom line, it's hypothesis-driven development is my recommendation here. Using impact mapping and maybe OKRs or something similar to really kind of help you see what your KPIs or your metrics are that matter to the business that are tied to those profit levers we discussed earlier. So yeah, and then the last thing is, if I'm an Agilist and I'm saying you should care about profit, you should be driven by profit. Well, what if I'm I'm passionate about Agile because I care about all the the kumbaya stuff, right? I care about I want people to feel good at work. I want love and peace in the world, and Agile has a lot of that in our community, and that's great. I'm not saying don't care about that. What I am saying is, if you figure out how to be profitable, now you have money to give to charities or take time off and go participate and do those worthy causes as well, right? So certainly make your workplaces a better place to work. But if you're more profitable, that's hopefully going into your pocket and giving you the flexibility to go make the world a better place in your own personal way. Okay, so that's my view of the world for this as far as where profit fits in. But yeah, this is it to wrap up. Any questions here? I know we didn't leave a lot of time at the end for questions, but I'm happy to stay a little bit past the hour. And you can always, any questions you type in or want to email or connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to respond to you and connect with you and just kind of continue to build and share more knowledge on this and learn from you guys too, how things are working in your context. I'm still on a learning journey on how best to help people with these topics, right? So this is an emergent area, I think, for the Agile community. I don't think a lot of us are focused on it, and I would love to have more of you join me and learn together and continue to move the ball forward.
Sure. Thanks, Andrew. I think I have a question from Marwan about the CV. The CV you defined, is it for the entire service or for the service slice?
Is the customer value defined for the entire service?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, customer value is, whatever your solution is. If it's a service, if you're selling software as a service, then yeah, you're looking at what is the value that your service delivers to them. So Miro, for example, delivers a whole bunch of benefits that potentially add up to tens of thousands of dollars. But I'm paying, say $12 a month per person. Pretty nominal, right? Now my willingness to pay might be depressed because I've got Mural, I've got Obeya, I've got Microsoft Whiteboard, if you really want to go the Teams and Office route, right? So that kind of depresses the willingness to pay, but that's kind of how you should think about it. Is it's what is the customer actually using or potentially willing to use? So for example, the slide earlier, let me go back to it. Actually, it'd be a little bit easier to talk about. So in this picture, I could offer a Miro package that has audit logging to business teams, but they're never going to use it. They're not set up to integrate Miro data with Splunk and, run analysis on that. They're not going to do pen testing. They're not going to do, it's not their ballgame, right? So that part of your solution, you want to find a way to segregate and not turn on for business teams because they're not going to use it, right? So you don't need to, it's built into your platform. It's just not turned on for those consumers and you're not charging them for it. That's kind of the basic approach of SaaS, right? Now, sometimes there are actual modules if you're buying SAP ERP systems, right, where you actually have to buy modules and there's a whole lot of work around integrating and loading data and yada, 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 right? So that's sometimes a lot more complex with those types of systems. But for more basic SaaS elements, you kind of build out a platform that does everything, and then based on the customer package and purchase profile, it just turns on certain aspects of the system for them, right? And
We'll
so,
just
yeah.
take another question. Is this applicable to nonprofits where your customers are internal teams?
Yes and no. So coming from the government space, I've had a lot of these thoughts immediately when I was exposed to the profit stream canvas. How would I use this with the government? And I think certainly the business value side that's not associated with revenue generation is very compelling, right? We still want to understand what is our value exchange. Do we have the right value exchange? So for example, when I did some work with National Student Clearinghouse, it's technically a nonprofit, but they generate revenue, and they were in the midst of transitioning part of their platform. They sell data, right? And they want to, make money off of selling that data. The key thing with nonprofits, right, is it's about what you do with that revenue and how you account for it in your accounting. So you still need to generate revenue, and you may still want to find ways to adjust the revenue lever. Same thing in the government space, right? We're not necessarily ending with a profit, but we do maybe care if you're USCIS and it's fee for service. You need to make sure that your fees that you're generating from your services exceed the costs of running the agency, right? So some of the fundamental elements here still exist as far as determining price points and so or fee values, if you will, and the value exchange models still apply. Certainly the licensing stuff applies, compliance. So there's definitely elements that apply, but I don't want to give you a full answer to that yet, because it's something that we've kicked around in our partner community, but we haven't really put pen to paper and explained it. And we're actually going to take some time this summer to try to work that out. So look for something by the end of the summer from the profit stream community. There should be some stuff coming out on that.
All right, excellent. With that, I want to say thank you to all our audience and everybody for joining and for being engaged. I know this can be a very dry topic, but I think Andrew did a fantastic job of making it very interesting and engaging all of us. And I think there were some great questions. And on behalf of everybody who's attending and from Loud Agile Network, Andrew, we thank you, not just for joining us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge, but also for being a supporter of Loud Agile Network for, I don't know, about 3 years now. So we definitely have had a good partnership. So we thank you for that. A quick update about our upcoming event. Next month on June 6th, we have Alan Zucker, who is a very well-known speaker on project management. So he's presenting Milestone Kanban, a hybrid scheduling technique. So that's going to be on June 6th. Please do sign up for that. And we are one of the fastest growing and one of the most stable, I was told just yesterday in a conference, Agile meetup in this area. And we are, as of today, 1,889 members. We want to get to 2,000 and we want to serve you. So please do join us. We have amazing sessions every month. So please do sign up. And with that, thank you, everybody. We will share the recording of this event, and we will also have the slides available. So look forward to sharing those with you. Once again, thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks, Toby and audience, for having me. And
thank you.